This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with John Hinckley of Modern Message. John, thank you for joining us.
Paul, thank you for having us on the show. Really grateful to be talking to your audience today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us as well. And so can you tell us more about how did you get into the early stage world?
I've always been an entrepreneur from day one. Was a Baylor business graduate in 2004 and kind of hit the market right after that with starting businesses and concepts and ideas, and failed quite a bit those first few years. My first startup was a kitchen product called the Lime Slicer. I got a few patents on it where I took the concept of an apple core and made it for limes and lemons so you could have something with your Corona. For a fresh guy out of college, a brilliant idea there. And had them produced in China and learned that it's really easy to lose a lot of money starting a business real fast. So that was my first one out of the gate when I was about 22 years old, and just always been fascinated with creating businesses, taking an idea and bring it into reality and, creating a market for it. And personally, I like to lean towards creating innovative ideas, something that hasn't been done before, something that's maybe a better way than we've done in the past. So my first actual startup that had somewhat success was in '07, started a text messaging company called Ireo, and I had developed the concept where you could text a single family home that was for sale and get information sent back to you about that property. This is back when it was mostly feature phones in the market. Smartphones were just starting to show up, and so most people didn't have a way to access the web. So text was a way to do that. And anyways, just fell in love with the idea of just coming up with something new and going for it. And turned out the single family market wasn't the best fit, but made a pivot to multifamily with this concept. And it ended up taking off and doing pretty well, and ended up growing that business until about 2011 when I exited and started working on the next business, which is where I'm at currently, called Modern Message. And so, yeah, I've always leaned towards being an entrepreneur. I've always loved to be creative and build businesses. And ever since I was little, that's what brought me here.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your fundraising experience and how you raised your funding and maybe your recent round and what lessons you learned from that?
Sure, absolutely. So we did our first round with Modern Message in about 2013 and ended up starting off with a friends and family round. We probably raised just under about $500,000 just to get the concept up and running. I found pretty quickly that you're not going to get very far unless you have some sort of revenue in place. So fortunately, we had a pretty good concept of this resident engagement, resident rewards programs for apartments, and had a handful of contracts in place that were recurring revenue models that once we put it together, we were able to take that to the angel groups and the friends and family groups and started to win over some people. But it took quite a bit of time on that first round. I'd say one of the challenges was meeting with so many people and finding that good fit. I mean, we met with hundreds of people before we actually ended up closing the first 500,000. And so what we learned was during that process on the early stage was the quicker you could get to that lead investor, the one that believed in your story, the one that aligned well and saw the vision that we were trying to go for. And when that guy was on board, it kind of took, the first big jump into the round. It was amazing how quickly the rest of the round just filled up. And so that experience was really great. Again, that was in 2013, and we didn't end up raising any more money until last summer, which was December 2017. That's when we pursued our second round, and we're kind of called it a very light Series A round, or we were with a venture company out of New York that took almost all of that round as well. That was about $2 million raise, and obviously it was a completely different experience going with the venture guys and with the angel guys. But at that point, we had such good momentum that we didn't have too much trouble connecting with that next group.
And so what was your big takeaway from the seed round? You said you have to have some revenue and then you need a lead investor. What else did you find was very helpful in closing that first round?
Yeah, was just being a great storyteller. You're there to get people excited. The angel guys are there because they want to get in something early that's exciting that could, blow up. And so being a great storyteller, I'd say was one of the biggest takeaways I learned in that process. I mean, it was really tough. Thankfully, it was so early in the business that we weren't as inundated with things like we were when we were doing our second round. The second round had a whole new group of challenges. One of the things that my business partner and I had to really, really work and struggle to get through was running a business while raising a Series A funding round and going through all the investor meetings and going through due diligence. And I mean, it was literally 2 full-time jobs trying to get through that process. So that was definitely one of the challenges of the second half of the second fundraise that we went through. But yeah, just learning how to sell the vision, knowing your TAM, your total addressable market, as these investors are asking questions, and knowing kind of what the opportunity really looks like and how realistic it was, and just finding that lead investor were 3 takeaways that we had in that process.
So if you had to do the raise again, what would you do differently this time?
So if I did the raise again, I would definitely go in the direction of a convertible note as opposed to selling shares in the company. I think that in my experience, again, this was 7 years ago or 6 years ago or so when we were starting this company, the idea of doing a convertible note would have been a much more favorable deal for us as a business. And so I would have, any startup that comes to us or comes to me and asks for advice, that's one thing I definitely encourage people to know, because we kind of did a little stick the finger up in the air and say, I think it's worth this. And we just dramatically undervalued it at that point. So that would be my advice.
Well, great. So it just helps set the terms better if you don't have to put the valuation right there up front. You just put it in later.
Exactly. Yeah, that was definitely one thing I would do differently.
Okay. And anything else?
Yeah, the other thing I would do differently is I would make sure it's tough in the early stage, because when you're a startup that needs money, you can't really be a chooser when you're raising money. But one thing that I would have definitely done differently as well is found investors that added more value than just money. There's a lot of doctors, lawyers, a lot of people that are wealthy that were very thankful, got involved, and grateful, and those people will do very well with their investment in Modern Message. But finding people that can contribute to the growth and contribute to the development of the business is something that I would have probably liked to have seen more of out of that first round. People that could help mentor the founders, people that could help us develop and grow faster, and then hit the market harder through their networks.
And for the first round, how long did that take? How many months?
First round took about 6 months from start to finish.
All right.
And I think that even then, I've heard it taking a lot longer for other people. For us, thankfully, we were able to close it out in the first 6 months. The second round, the Series A round, actually took almost 10 months or almost a year to get through it. But one of the main reasons why it took so long from start to finish was just how difficult it was to get through all the due diligence, get through all the funding meetings and investor meetings while also running a business. There was just only so much of us to go around. And when you're a bootstrap startup like Modern Message, you got to do the best you can to make that work. So yeah, so that's my thoughts there.
Well, that's great. Well, in the last couple of minutes we have here, what else should we cover about your fundraising experience that you would like others to know?
Obviously, a lot of companies just try to start a business and don't really have their revenue strategy built out, or they'll kind of have an idea of, hey, revenue will come, or eventually people start paying for it. I'd say that one of the things that was the most powerful was how we came to the table immediately with annual recurring revenue contracts, which definitely caught the ear of a lot of our investors. And even in talking to different private equity firms as we're potentially looking to do our next round, the annual recurring revenue income is high quality revenue that a lot of these guys look for. So with any startup that's out there growing businesses, I would recommend they look for ways to build annual recurring revenue models, because that certainly made our search a lot easier and the interest was a lot higher as a result, versus transaction revenue.
And bringing closed contracts to the negotiation table certainly helps as well.
Absolutely. If you don't have anything closed, if you don't have something solid in place, I think most investors see right through that. And so that was really fortunate of us to be able to have those in place as we started our fundraising round. The year or so before that, oh man, it was a little terrifying trying to get those initial contracts in place. But once we got them in place, took them to the investors, sold them the story, the fundraising just kind of flowed forward from there. And we're very fortunate.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate those words of advice. And how best for the audience to get back in touch with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, John Hinckley on LinkedIn. And for those of your audience out there, there's absolutely no relation to that guy out there. But I can be found that way, or you can email me at john@modernmsg.com. And on there, you'll see a number of ways to reach out to me.
Very good. Well, we'll put that in the show notes so people can get back in touch with you and also to the company Modern Message. So appreciate your taking time to share that information with us today and hope to have you back for a follow-on in the near future.
Thank you, Hall. Great to be with you.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.